Hello, everybody. This is Justine Case of American Newscape, rejoining our friend Scott Dudley. I don't know where Luna is, but for American Consciousness. Hello, Scott. Welcome back to American Newscape.
Welcome back. And yeah, we have a wild card in the room because the executive producer of the show, Luna, woke up and she's kind of pretty curious about what we're doing right now. And
Well,
so she may make an on-camera appearance. I'm
I,
not exactly sure.
well, Luna, I think it's important that you pay attention to what we're going to attempt to do because we need you paying attention. Hey, Luna.
There she is.
There she is. All right.
Waiting to tear the tape down off of the little camera thing that I've got going on. So
Okay. Hey, Scott, are you ready for this? Are you paying attention to what we're trying to do?
this is one of those topics. When I throw a topic into the room with my production team, like at the dog park or texting my kids or whatever, it's one of the measures of quality of the topic is how many unanswered questions does it bring up, and how many different directions does it go. And this one just got a bunch of hits on it. So let's talk about something that we're always doing, but we're rarely paying attention to in some sort of proactive management fashion. And that is attention and awareness. All right.
Okay.
So let me start by this kind of breaking down what awareness could be versus what attention is. So if you think about attention, it's right now. I'm trying to pronounce all the words correctly. I'm trying to sequence the next sentence. I'm trying to stay on topic. I'm trying to do all of the right things associated with radio or with a podcast. Right? That's attention. And that's where my attention is, tunnel vision. Awareness. I'm aware that Luna the cat is now really aggressively going tape. I'm aware it's a little bit warm. I'm aware I haven't had lunch yet today, and so I'm looking forward to that as soon as that happens for us. Got a little bit of tightness in my jaw. There's an awareness point. So awareness is that big vat of stuff that you're sitting in. And it can be stuff inside of your body. It can be stuff with your primary relationships. It can be stuff with your community or your administrative functions. I got some bills to pay. I need to deal with that. It could be and it could be bigger stuff. It could be global warming. It could be things that are really hard to manage, but they're part of your awareness. And sometimes if you focus your attention on it, you can spend a lot of attention on something that isn't necessarily going to bend over backwards because you're paying attention to it and change, and fix itself just because you thought it was important.
Well, kind of like me in the podcast, I don't pay any attention to pronunciation of words, and I really don't worry about it. I just kind of go with the flow. And what I do pay attention to is what you say, because you may say something that I need to remember. Something worthwhile.
No. Nice. Okay, so that's the basic ground rules of attention and awareness. Awareness is the big thing that surrounds us. Attention is where we begin to specifically focus in that big thing. And this gets interesting because that means that you can be aware of attention. Your attention is part of that big vat of awareness. At the same token, you can begin to focus your attention on your awareness. What am I thinking of? What's going on right now? Where am I at? And so you've got this kind of interrelationship. And I think that's what makes it an interesting topic, because are we just going to sit around and let our attention run us around in little circles like a dog chasing its tail? Or are we going to begin to be able to respect our awareness and then mitigate and manage our attention within that big field of awareness in ways that create our best selves? That I think is what's sitting on the topic today.
Well, we all remember being back in grade school, um, letting our minds drift or daydreaming, and that was not productive for us. And I'm wondering, as we mature into adults, have we actually taught our brains to try and tone that down so we can remain more productive?
That's an interesting point of consideration because we actually got a disorder, right? Attention deficit disorder.
We all do, absolutely.
Well, and in fact, we all do, which is part of the meaninglessness of pathology. When everybody can say, "Well, yeah, me too," then the people who really probably need some support are left out there, like not really noticing it or being able to deny it and say, "Well, look, everybody's got ADHD, me too." But attention deficit is interesting because it's not that you're lacking attention; it's that your attention is more free flowing and more situational. Hey, look at the birdie, and that type of attention is really good for some things. It's if you were out the olden days, if you were out shepherding a bunch of sheep and you were just kind of hanging out there watching the butterflies, watching the birds and bees, feeling the wind, just having this really good experience, and you had uh, a, an attention that jumped around, you'd notice the wolf because you'd have that ability to kind of jump from one thing to another and not be so stuck in the beautiful butterfly that all of your sheep got eaten. And so in some respects, that variable attention, that ability to flow, sometimes at request, sometimes like it seems involuntary almost, may be an advantage. Where it's not an advantage is when you're sitting in school for 6 hours a day and open your book to page 82 and listen while we read along.
Yeah.
That then it becomes problematic.
I was always a sucker for motivational posters and things like that. And as a young adult in a pretty powerful industry, on my wall, it said, it's hard to keep your mind on the task of draining the swamp when you're up to your ass in alligators.
I remember that. I remember that poster well. It was
So that was a snap of the fingers. And if I caught myself reading that poster, I needed to get back to draining the swamp.
nice, and so we can set up various attention alerts, if you will, right? So if I find myself thinking about this, or if I find myself doing that, then I can pull myself back on unexpected tasks and do whatever I was quote unquote supposed to be doing.
Well, I think you and I have a few tools to deal with it, but what I'm anxious to hear is what are the real people, what are the people in the dog park talking about?
It was interesting because a lot of their attentional energy, their awareness energy, fell on really really baseline stuff. My back hurts today. Uh, this person's bugging me. That they're wanting me to do chores and stuff, and I'm not up to doing it, or so their attentional awareness was really highly individualized, and that's kind of interesting to me as well because highly individualized, sometimes car crashes up against our expectations that we're all supposed to be, you know, in this in a general lane of how we interpret things and how we behave and what we should be worrying about. And it was really individual. It was
Well, we've all learned as adults that if we're highly stressed or we're in pain, even if it's moderate pain, it can have a devastating effect on our health and our ability to stay focused on what we need to stay focused on.
that. So you bring up a really good point, and that is that there are a lot of little important peripheral things that can be real attention grabbers. That backache, that headache, that grouchy boss, that the hot weather outside, all of these things, if we're not managing our attention, can just jump in and grab us, right? And all of a sudden we spend hours, valuable minutes, we're posting on social media, whatever, and about something that, if we stopped and unraveled it, if we stopped and said, is this really where I want to spend my little bit of attention that I can sustain on the weather?
Well, you're exactly right, and perspective is everything. And we know, all of us, we all know there are some things we can't change, and the weather's one of them.
Absolutely. And so serenity prayer may be an important attentional tool or guideline. So basically, give me the courage to change the things I can change, and give me the wisdom to accept the things I can't change.
Well,
And use that as kind of an initial tool with your attention, saying, well, I'm going to devote some attentional energy to this. Is this something that I should probably just accept? Or is this one of those things where I need to die on this hill to defend it because it's that important? And go from there in terms of I'd like to think attention's precious, right?
absolutely.
It's like you've only got so much, so you've only got so much of it. And I had a friend who really aptly said that, if you want to know what you love in life, check out what you're paying attention to, because your attention's your most valuable gift that you've got. And so if you're spending it on something, you must care about that thing a heck of a lot. That always struck me. That always was like, oh, so me being all like up in arms about the weather, doesn't really line up to where I'd like to think that my love or my attention should flow to.
Well, exactly, Scott. It's like when the power goes out, and we experience this all across the world. It's inconvenient, but there's no point in stressing about it or letting ourselves get all worked up or letting it dominate our thoughts unless we work for the power company.
Right. And some of that we can mitigate, because if we've got like the power's off, this is the planet.
Yeah, exactly.
And we've got some stuff lined up that okay, well, we're not going to open the refrigerator, this is how we save our water, these are where the batteries are, whatever. Then some of that pre-attention, if you will, saves us from kind of stress. And these examples are really good, because what's at the core of all of these attention grabbers? Emotion.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's is it fear? Is it panic? Is it anger? Is it even joy and happiness become attention drivers? Because how I gonna out my dad here. My dad could spend hours on top of days on top of weeks planning vacations, and he would do the research, and he would pull out the books, and he would get guides, and he would put it all together and it was like he would hyper focus on it. It was amazing. And to be honest, the vacations were pretty good.
But that was
But
his favorite part of the whole process.
it was all about the dreaming it up. Yep.
That's
Very much so.
that's cool. And
And and it was okay for him.
and you as well, and the whole family, you were all beneficiaries of his passion of trying to make this the best vacation possible.
Well, once I figured out, probably about 12 or so, that it was really all in the planning for him. And
Yeah.
what actually happened was like a coin toss. Then once I got that, I could accept that in him and say, that's interesting. And am I going to apply my attention to that level of organizational planning? And I didn't quite go that far. I think I probably do quite a bit of organizational planning,
You
but
do.
But I didn't I don't try to XYZ everything out as clearly as it could be because life throws you too many variables.
Well, and that's kind of the way I am. I would rather head in a direction and find out what's there, as opposed to, wondering if there's a gas station down the road. Well, I'm not going to worry about it. There'll either be a gas station down the road or I'll run out of gas. I mean, it's kind of the cost of doing business, of being on an adventure.
That's a fun coin toss. I've taken that one a few times.
Uh, one thing you haven't brought into the equation. We do know that we can be blindly in love, and that can make us stupid and deflect our attention from what we need to be focusing on. And heartbreak can also do that.
Because okay, so this is this. Let's play this out through what why do I choose to put my attention on any given thing? And we were actually, this was part of our dog park conversation the other day was I'm 6 weeks into eating better, and I've kind of got myself at a more comfortable weight. And so the debate is, did I do that so that I can have a more smoothly functioning body, which is definitely true, or because my self-esteem is tied up in people loving me and thinking I'm cute, and that feedback, I needed it. I was hungry for it, and so it motivated me to do what I do. You could look at relationships that way.
Okay.
So I feel like without you I'm nothing, right?
Well,
Or
I
if I don't
agree.
have a partner, if I don't have a partner, I'm just not uh, as good of a person as I think I should be. So I need to have a partner. And now I'm driven by that expectation, and it really grabs my attention and focuses it, and all of a sudden I'm so dialed into that crush or that need to sustain something that maybe is not the best thing to sustain, and my awareness of all of this stuff is diminished because my attention's so hyper focused because it's so important.
That's a new perspective for me, and I think you're right, Scott. If I'm so focused on draining the swamp, my awareness doesn't have room to play a role in the decisions that I'm getting ready to make.
One of the things I try to do with my attention versus awareness is I try on a regular basis, and meditation is actually a part of this, to diminish my attention and allow myself to be more aware of the big space of awareness that typically I'm not. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to stop really focusing on getting something done or being a certain way or doing something that is required of me in the moment, and looking in the nooks and corners and cracks, opening up the cupboards of my awareness and saying, what's there? What do I see when I quiet myself down? What's hiding in the corner back there? Was that God I just saw? Was that the beauty of an old person being nice to a young person? All the little things that I might miss because I'm so dialed in.
All right.
Uh, I try to take regular time to just be aware without being purpose driven, without being attentive to anything more than the general feeling of being aware.
Well, that's great advice. There were times, I'm very capable of extreme focus when need be, but there's times that, and the best way to describe it in my life, let's say I was hunting for mushrooms, so we don't offend anybody, but I would be out in the tall woods with my geographic map.
Edible but non
Yeah,
hallucinogenic mushroom.
yeah,
Let's be absolutely
exactly,
clear.
exactly. And I'd be out in the woods with 70-foot trees with my geographic map, which does absolutely no good because you can't see over the trees, nor could you see a mountain in the horizon. And 5 minutes into that, I would be lost. And the reason I would be lost is because I would see something interesting. I would see a squirrel. Hello, squirrel. Hello, deer. Hello. And I would just keep walking into the woods. And instead of being stressed, when I would leave on these excursions, I was quite confident that I would quickly become lost. But when I needed to focus, I would figure out a way to get back where I needed to be. And that made that whole experience very, very pleasing to me. But if you were with me and you walked up and said, "Where are we?" I would look at you and say, "I have no clue." And that would
No.
bother a lot of people. Are we lost? No, we know where we are. We just don't know
I
right now where we need to be.
I had to come up to a solution because I go out in the desert and look for rocks. And so first of all, I'm looking at the ground, but then secondly, I'm following contours instead of trails or directions. And so inevitably, that's a really easy way to get completely turned around and misplaced. But after a couple of times of going, okay, well, where are we and how do we get back? And boy, it's hot outside. I started thinking, well, okay, so what am I going to? So every 50 yards or so, I will stop and deliberately turn around and look at whatever was exactly behind me and kind of make a mental note and say, okay, this is what it looks like. So that when I'm walking back in that direction, I can be like, oh, yeah, 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 I remember where we are. I need to go around this corner. I need to go over this hill, whatever. And that was enough attention for me to kind of alleviate whatever potential risk or anxiety or dread or whatever I was working myself up to. The dread that you don't feel in the forest.
No, well, exactly. You and I at the campfire that night talking about, I'd say, what did you see and where did you go? You could basically tell me everything that was 50 feet behind you because that's what you would have needed to remember. I would have told you, I saw 12 squirrels and two snakes and a bear and a mountain lion.
Okay. I get my share. I get my share of those too. Those are fun. You know, one question I think I have with attention, as opposed to awareness, is I always come back to kind of the Aretha Franklin line: "Who's zooming who?" So many times I find myself being really attentive to something, and when I stop and I catch myself and I think about it, thinking, why am I choosing to be super attentive to this? What was what was the societal message? What was I taught in Sunday school as a kid? What did my third grade teacher tell me? What did the cop tell me? And how did that internalize itself to the fact that now whenever it comes up, I'm going to stop and pay very good attention. You know, there's some good examples, right? I mean, following the rules of the road.
Right,
So
right.
culturally, that's a really good idea. So everybody benefits. You benefit. Safety benefits. Everybody benefits. But it's something that was overlaid onto us. It was said, if you want to be a good driver, you need to pay attention.
Right.
And if you're not paying attention, you're not a good driver. And that and you could kill your family or whatever kind of other threats they would put behind that. And so with a lot of different behaviors, paying your bills on time, you know, um, eating at a certain hour, eating in a certain way. Does your family sit with you at the dinner table? Um, and arranging life so that that happens, which is basically the act of putting attention on something. Where did it come from? And in reflection, is it worth it?
Well, exactly, because we can put too much attention on something and suck all the joy out of it.
That perfect front yard.
Exactly. Um, well, exactly. Th that perfect trip. I mean, that perfect. That's why I would worry about your dad, even though he planned the perfect trip. Could he relax once he was on it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think he was pretty good about that. I mean, he's he liked to drink, so
That made it easier.
that made it easier, right? To kind of just sit back and let the world take care of itself.
I got you here. You're kind of on your own. Uh, no,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
that's what makes for a great topic, and it proves that these emotions and these feelings and our focus and our attention and our awareness are so intertwined. They kind of make up who we are.
And if we just take it all at default, default is a choice. That came up in the dog parks here. It's like even if you are not making decisions about where to put your attention, those decisions are happening, and then you're left with the consequences of however that life is going for you.
Well, and they can be second nature. I mean, after you've driven safely long enough, it becomes second nature to you. So you become reactionary, and you don't have to focus on it as much. You do have to pay attention, but you do not have to focus on it because it's become second nature.
So you've got muscle memory essentially.
Absolutely. It's like athletics. That one breakthrough in any sport is when it starts to become second nature to you because then your muscles join the club.
You're saying there's still hope for the lotus position, or
No,
I
no,
should
no.
pretty much write that off at this point.
Some things it's just better to let it go.
Yeah, yeah. My hips have been telling me that for years.
Well, it's just like, I can look back, I would love to be out there running 60-yard sprints, but I can't. So I gave it up. It's physically impossible. It would be extremely dangerous, but it doesn't mean I don't remember enjoying it, but I don't begrudge not being able to do it anymore.
So I think we can begin to without putting too much attention on attention, right? Because that's probably a whole nother trap, if you will. And you sit around all day and worry about what I pay attention to, and go down all of these little rabbit holes about, well, was this cultural influence? It was that. I'm not sure. Is this important? Is it not? And pretty soon you've got paralysis by analysis,
Oh, absolutely.
and that seems like not such a good idea either. However, the flip side is my attention just gets to do whatever it wants without ever asking me or telling me, and I'm just kind of following along behind it, picking up the pieces, cleaning up the messes, dealing with whatever that attentional energy did. And that doesn't seem like that's the best path either. I mean, it seems like that's a really reactive life.
Well, yeah, I agree, and I think we all have certain aspects of both those in various aspects of our life. I can't, when I do allow myself to watch TV, I want it to be stupid TV because I'm asking my mind to shut down from the day. But there's other people that can watch The Walking Dead or something like
Wait,
that.
that's stupid TV. I thought for sure that was going to make the list.
Well, but there's people that can do that. But could I do that? No, I couldn't do that. That would just be counterproductive to everything I'm trying to accomplish in a day, and rest is important.
You know what? And you're right. Walking Dead was not mindless enough for me because it got too focused in on the human relationship stuff and less on the zombies. And so when I showed up like just wanting mindless zombie rage and destruction, I was like these people are falling in apocalyptic love, and do I really care?
No.
I didn't care enough to pay attention to it, for sure.
But there's people
You know,
that's must see TV for them.
oh, absolutely, and that's the conscious choice part of it. That to say that this is, this is almost an aging thing. So if you're under the age of 35, you probably should just put this on pause and turn it back on in 15 years. Because ultimately, I think at some point you wake up in the morning and go, you know what? I've got a day, I've got 5 years, I've got 10 years, I got 20 years, and that's probably about all I can reasonably expect to get. What am I going to do with my remaining time on earth in this weird identity that somehow just happened all around me? To be my best self, to maximize the time, to bring myself to peace, to bring myself to accomplishment, and sit down and really own that and take responsibility for it. And I think this awareness versus attention consideration is a good first step in that.
Well, it's opened my eyes. I mean, it can help explain some of my path because some things become all consuming at certain ages in our life. When we're out trying to meet members of the opposite sex, we have different focus, different attention. And as we get older, then we get into a survive. You get it. I think where you want to get is when you get older, you want as much joy out of the day as you can get, and there's so many factors to that. So, but that takes attention. To keep
Well,
yourself in
and I
that frame of
honestly,
mind.
honestly wish I would have rolled back and started that 20 years ago. Yeah, I feel like I was a little bit late out of the starting gate in terms of, well, this isn't a very satisfying, joyful moment in my life. Why am I even enduring it?
Well, when there again, Scott, you had more responsibilities at that age than I did because you had a family, you had a wife, you had kids, you had cats. I mean, so it's different, and I think we have to respect each other's perspectives of, and certainly where they find themselves. You could be
I
you could be incarcerated in a maximum security prison, and you still need to focus, and you still need to have some attention. But I don't wish you. I have no mal will towards you, and I hope you can find some joy. I don't know what that would be, but I hope you can find it.
Well, and I hope my attorney can somehow smuggle me in a cell phone so we can keep doing the show.
Well,
Um,
I hope you have an attorney outside of this region, but
I've got some attorneys. This is funny, Kurt, because there was a time when I started meditating, and it was probably after about 5 years or so, that I just kind of I got out of a session and I was just sitting there quietly, and I came to the realization that I could be locked up in a cage in solitary confinement with no stimulation, with nothing to do, and I would be completely okay because I'd found that spot inside of myself that didn't need to be fed, that didn't need stimulation, that didn't need to have to do something to be considered valuable. And that was like a real breakthrough. I'll be honest. That's why I'm underachieving today. That's
you do you believe that that was always part of you, and meditation just helped you see it?
I do believe that. Yes, but I would also say that how many people have that calm, unmovable, perfectly okay spot inside of them that they haven't noticed it yet because they've been too busy, because they've been following the edicts of society, of their parents, their education system, and been running around trying to be a good human their whole life without ever stopping and taking a pause and saying, okay, who am I really?
Well, I think for a lot of us, we never do quite put a finger on that. Um, but it's interesting. And this is a good topic. So what? So you use meditation. I use the face in the mirror technique. But I'm guessing meditation is more. I don't think that's focus. I mean, that isn't that just relaxation to help clear your mind?
It's interesting. It is, I would say it is you're really leaning into awareness and trying to relax attention. So you're going to, attention's just going to happen anyway. It doesn't, you're not the boss of attention. Many times attention's the boss of you.
Yeah, exactly.
And so you could be sitting there in meditation, and the bills to pay could just all of a sudden stand up and raise their hand and say, sit down and start factoring the summer electric bill into to how much money you have. And you're trying to meditate. So you're sitting there going, hey, wait a minute, brain. This is my quiet time. This is my time to just to be the unjudgmental observer of my awareness, not to figure out my bills. And that may take a moment. And in meditation, that it happens all the time. And so ultimately what you're doing is you're just kind of gently forgiving yourself and moving on. Say, okay, well, there are bills. They probably do need to be paid. And I'm going to take a deep breath and let that one flow down the river, and see what else is in my awareness and see what else pops up.
Well, in having dabbled in hypnosis, that's about, you know, uh, actually putting someone in a very relaxed state where they trust not necessarily you, but they trust your voice, and that's baffling in itself because if you ever dabble in hypnosis, you will also dabble in self hypnosis, which can be very effective to focusing and directing where you want your attention to go. So we can manipulate it. You manipulate it in meditation.
Oh, absolutely. There's a type of yoga where you maintain the moment of sleep and awake. So when you're awake and you're falling asleep, there's a crossover point, and we've all felt it. And we all, every night we cross this spot. This type of yoga is designed to notice that spot and then withhold and then stay in it, and then
Wow.
just kind of stay in. I'm asleep and I'm awake at the same time, and let that spot just, and that's a really nice awareness spot, because as you've fallen asleep, you're less driven by your attention. You're that's kind of is trying to take a break. And so you've got this moment where you're just able to kind of concentrate in a whole different way. And yet if you try to call it that, if you try to think, well, I'm concentrating, you ruin it. So
Well,
but I practiced that for years, and I love it. That's still one of my favorite times.
well, hypnosis is talking to the subconscious. I mean, it's a direct line to the subconscious. It will make some people do things they can't imagine that they will do because it's a suggestion that goes directly to their subconscious, and they're either comfortable enough with themselves to allow that to happen or not. Are they fully asleep? No. That's why they're aware after the fact.
Listeners, if I start barking like a dog right now, it is
I
not my fault.
I did not do it.
It's the guy with the voice.
Yeah. Yeah, the figment of your imagination, everybody.
So there
Uh,
are some really dialed in ways to get to this differentiation, to get to that point. But I think it's something you can do while you're brushing your hair in the morning, while you're in the shower, while you're doing something where you got the muscle memory, and you don't have to absolutely focus on it. And you could just say, where's my attention right now? What am I thinking about? Is that what I want to think about? What else is happening in my awareness? Are there other interesting things that are going on that I'm not noticing because my attention's dialed into something else? And I think we could just do that without hypnosis, without having to do this yoga thing, even without meditation. I think it's just something that we can train ourselves to, like, stop on a regular basis and say, okay, where's my attention? And can I turn it off for a little bit, or at least step back from it? And then can I be more aware of other things in my environment or in my head or in my space or wherever that I might be missing out on?
All right. I tell myself all the time to stay in the moment. And I make that suggestion to others, stay in the moment, stay with me. Let's be on the same page. And I do that to myself a lot because my mind will drift. I'll be wondering what's Luna doing now, which is counterproductive to what you and I are trying to do.
She resumed sleeping on the little balcony above the camera, so we're all good. I've got a cat that helps train me though in this, and her name's Bruna the second to be official. But she was a cat who got picked up and fixed to be given to PetSmart or whatever. But she was caught late in her taming period, and so she never tamed. And so she was always like brutally defensive, like she would cut to kill. And at some point, I decided that I was going to pet this cat regardless. I don't care how angry you are. I don't care how much blood you're going to shed. I'm just gonna start petting you because I'm not a bad human and you're not a bad cat. And Bruno the first was actually one of my favorites, and so ultimately I owed it to Bruno the second. Well, here's the thing. I have to be super, even to this day, I have to be super aware of what my hand is doing in relationship to her reactions, or I'm going to get scratched. And it's such a good tool to focus attention. I mean, I have to when I touch her, I have to let go of all of my energy. I have to just zero out. And or she's going to start reacting. Her tail will start twitching, and pretty soon she'll be getting ready to hit me. And she hits hard. And so in a way that I see this opportunity. Like, okay, it's just petting a cat, whatever. But ultimately, it's training me to be very, very aware of her physiology, her reactions, her feelings, and how my hand is interacting with that. And I'm, I tell her how grateful I am on a regular basis. I think, without you, I wouldn't be able to do these things.
Well, absolutely. And, all our pets, they feed off of our energy, so we have to be careful. If you have a 12-foot python as a pet, the worst thing you can do is show fear around that snake, and those are the people that get bit by those snakes.
Yeah, you're just asking for it, right?
Right. And same thing with cats. My cat and I have a relationship where he's not quite sure is he responsible for me or am I responsible for him? So he's always checking to see that I'm okay. And it's very
Cats are nice about that. They go back and forth.
oh, absolutely. And he instinctually likes to bite to encourage you to play with him. Well, I don't like that. So he's slowly working through the process of biting me softer and softer and softer.
You know what? That is, you see that process happen.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm not going to play with you if you're going to draw blood. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Pretty simple.
It's not that fun. Right. And
I've got a dog that reacts to fear. And when somebody or something is scared of her, she gets really, really scared herself because in her history, people and animals that have been scared of her have hurt her.
yeah.
And so her whole reaction thing, and I try to unravel this on a regular basis, and it ain't easy. But her whole thing is, if you're scared of me, I'm really scared of you. And then
Well,
she starts acting like, and then she starts acting like an angry dog, and then the scared, we go like this.
yeah, it accelerates, and I've always amazed by, I remember when I first saw Caesar Milan, and I thought, what a joke this is, but no, it's not. Here's a man that's been gifted, probably sold his soul to the devil, to have this gift with animals and all animals, but he's in tune with them, and he teaches others to be in tune with them, and I think I've learned a lot from him. I was
I've seen a lot from him too.
And I was fortunate. I always had big, strong dogs, but I was an alpha. So even as a kid, I was an alpha. I didn't know not to be an alpha, so I never had any problems with them. They never needed to protect me. Even if they did, they weren't going to. So we didn't have any of these issues. No biting, no, none of that.
Yeah, I inherit dogs. I inherit dogs with stuff, and that's just who I am. I guess it's one of those attract things.
Well, yeah, maybe that's it. I'm not sure, but
Here's
yeah.
here's the perfect dog for you, Scott. It's like a dog that you can never take off a leash, and you can't walk in the park, and you know, and heaven forbid if the cops ever pull you over with the dog in the car, because that's going to be a disaster.
Well,
But
here's my story. Somebody I used to hire to work for me, and he was younger, and he had my stature and strength, and I was talking to him one day. I said, I always wanted a Rottweiler. So he called me one day, and this is how dumb I can be. He called, I got your dog for you. Really? Yeah, I got you a Rottweiler. Name's Trouble. Okay.
oh,
Well, what he had done was he had seen his neighbor abusing this dog violently in the front yard. So he went over there and took the dog away from him and thought he would just give him to me. Well, that dog had a lot of issues, and I knew I wasn't bright enough to take them on. But that was because of abuse. And you talk about your dog having issues, hopefully he or she will slowly come out of it and be better each day. And I'll bet you since you've had him, it is better each day.
the dog park is the therapy. So being off a leash, being all stuff of being a dog without the pressure of being on a leash or the pressure of having to defend a human has proven pretty beneficial to her. I think she's always going to be a little bit, and some of it's breed, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Certain breeds have certain tendencies.
Well,
I want to switch it. I want to switch it from pets to humans, though, because
that's why
the
we're here.
same attention awareness thing happens in our relationships. How often do we get a spouse who's having a kind of reactive moment, and instead of saying, "Wow, it sounds like this is really frustrating for you," taking it personally and saying, "Well, it's not my fault," and all of a sudden now it's going like this again, because our attention was more focused on our own self-esteem, on our own feelings, instead of trying to just notice and validate that other person's, even if we were responsible for some of that reaction.
Well, and in a long-term relationship, we better be getting better at handling those situations. I don't say, "Are your hormones acting up, dear?" anymore.
Yeah, that's never been a winner for me.
No, it's not. Um, but that is, being aware that every situation is what I think makes life more fulfilling. And maybe that's just me.
Well, and the ability to say that I'm around a person who's having a tough day, which is awareness, and not being taken hostage by attention and saying, I don't deserve this kind of treatment, or it's not my fault, or that kind of reactive personalization. That's a skill. It's something that we can practice over time and get better at. And then when we do that, we save ourselves some escalating argument. We save ourselves some anger chemicals in our body, and ultimately at the end of the day, stuff still works out.
Well, I don't know if this was applied to me or so it became learned behavior. But when you have a close friend and all of a sudden you see them overreacting dramatically to a situation, what I learned to do, like in your instance, I would say, "Scott, this is not you. What else is bothering you?"
Nice. And again, kind of being aware of something rather than being driven by attention relative to how does this relate to me.
And see, that's like a snap of the fingers reset for you. And a lot of times that's all it takes. And you might say, "I'm sorry," and you'll just get back in the moment. And for me, I use the face in the mirror. You use meditation and other techniques. But it's like flipping the switch, which a good friend of mine who gets paid lots of money going all over the world to say it, it's a good moment in time.
We could use our attention to validate situations and people, and in doing that, we could save ourselves so much additional energy sorting stuff out later. Because you're right. Hey, you're having a really hard day. What's going on?
Yeah.
Is enough to get that person to take stock of themselves for a moment and unravel whatever was going on,
And
just by us noticing.
well, yeah, sharing with them that we care. I am smart enough to recognize this isn't you. And, when people say that to us, we tend to go, oh, you're right. This isn't me. You're, and, uh, and they can be appreciative. I assume not all the time, but in my case, they have been. And it works for me because I've shown empathy at that moment and I get some satisfaction out of that. And then we get back at the task at hand.
You know what I appreciate about it, and this kind of almost takes me back to the dog park community, because it's so many diverse individuals. It's something I can't recreate in social media as often as I try,
Right.
um, because there's just a bunch of really disparate people with a lot of different beliefs and ages and everything, and different thoughts about dogs, everything. Um, but what happens is to be alert like that and say, "Wow, it sounds like you're really frustrated by this," also gives us the opportunity to reflect on whether that's something that we get frustrated about. So when I take these co-production meetings out to the dog park and I say, well, we're going to talk about awareness this week. What do you guys think? In that open-ended question, in that whole universe of possibility, I get stuff that I hadn't thought about.
Yeah.
And just because I haven't thought about it doesn't mean it's not driving me. Doesn't mean it's not a big part of who I am.
Exactly.
And so it's really useful to me in terms of my attention and awareness to be able to sit and listen and hear something from someone else and not just dismiss it and not just throw it away, not just kind of go on with what am I going to say next, but to sit there and kind of just weigh it and say, this is interesting. How did this person get to this point? And is there something inside of me that's going through a similar process?
Well, we go back to when we were in school. The best educators we had were interested in our perspectives as opposed to rulers, telling us what to think. They wanted to know what we thought. And I'm sure in most instances they were utilizing that information to broaden their perspectives.
Didn't get a ton of that in school, but when I got it, I sure appreciated it. It was like magic. It was like, oh, this is what you can do with education.
Yeah, well, exactly. Well, yeah, and I was kind of resistant to the dictator theory of being an educator. But that's why the dog park is so interesting. You're taking all those perspectives and you're shaking them up, and you're sorting through them, and you're adding to your toolkit.
And they get to see, the cool thing is they're actually sorting through as much as I am. So as soon as I throw awareness at the table, I can step back and they're talking to each other about their awareness points. And so it's not I'm not even like facilitating the group or whatever. I'm just kind of sitting there kind of, oh, that person noticed this about that, and I didn't notice that. And that helps kind of enrich it a lot too. I think that's something that we have kind of stepped away from as humans, and certainly the pandemic and stuff like that didn't help. But that whole kind of coming around a table, not all of the same mind, not all of the same age, not all of the same belief systems, and just being able to kind of hold space where everybody is allowed to be themselves, and we take advantage of whatever learning we can find there on stuff that hasn't occurred to us.
So I always envisioned that you were having one-on-one conversations, but you're talking to a group of people and they're talking to each other. Makes it a lot more interesting, Scott.
We got a big pagoda, and on the weekends it's packed. um, we're all sitting next to each other, whether we wanted to be hot and sweaty together or not. And that's where you see this very very disparate but very interesting types of reflections.
Well, and I'm assuming that your court, so to speak, is enjoying those moments.
We've turned the corner a little bit. So nowadays, if I haven't brought it up by Wednesday or so, the production team is like, "So what are you guys going to talk about this week?"
That's cool. That is actually very cool. And you know, I would have never been bright enough to do that, Scott, but the idea that you had enough courage to do that and the compassion to bring everybody together, I said that's a cool thing.
You know what? Yellow Submarine was one of my favorite movies growing up, and one of the biggest takeaways from that film for me was the Knower Man. And so when Jeremy was was a brilliant person, was a brilliant entity, and he really did know everything, but he didn't. And that to me has always been the trick. It's like it's not what you know, it's what you know that you don't know. And that's what the dog park helps me get to, is that I may have a take on something, but it's a take that was really built and funneled out of my own process, out of my own life, out of my own
Sure.
experiences. And ultimately that doesn't mean it's the correct one.
Well, exactly. That's why we need to preface things with what works for me. What works
Yeah,
for
yeah,
me.
yeah, yeah.
And no, that's that. You know, it's just I'm envisioning you holding court under the pagoda with people that really care what you're asking and what you have to say. So that's interesting.
Well, and again, I do my best to step out of the way as quickly as possible.
Well, yeah, but you're the ringleader, and you know what's fascinating is all their dogs get to experience what's going on. They're experiencing these adult human beings being very social with one another.
And you know what? I haven't really brought that up, but the community of dogs is actually pretty amazing too. And how they choose their relationships with all the various people in the park, and how they relate to each other. And you're right, that's a part of that community that's very very valuable. And you know, I there's one dog there that has a blind eye, and I'll always remember the first day that this dog came up to me from the blind side and gave me a kiss.
Oh, he didn't
Because
know
it
you.
was like he finally was able to trust that he didn't have to see me to know that I was an okay person. And I always remember it because I was like, yeah, I've dealt with animals with disabilities, and they can be fairly finicky about how they cover for themselves.
Well, yeah, and they all have a adult deficit disorder just like us, don't they?
It's kind of and sort of depends on the, again, with dogs, depends on the breed.
Well, that's true. Some dogs are dumber than a box of rocks, and I don't mean to offend you Airedale owners, but I
Well, you
did.
know, if you inbreed any breed enough, you're that's your net result. Talk to the collies. Talk to the Irish setters. That's why you don't see Irish setters out in public anymore.
Well, yeah, they're not. Well, yeah, I had one Irish setter once, and he was more than I could handle. Lots of shepherds because they wanted to be good. Irish setter did not care
No, no, no. I'm not sure they were aware of what good actually consisted of.
or care. And that's, you know, of all the Caesar Milans I've watched, and we're talking about the dog whisperer, I've never seen him treat or tame a psychotic Irish setter,
Nope, nope. He picks from breeds that have a possibility of reforming
keeping him a
if they're
star.
if they're treated correctly.
So that's my advice to everybody. When you go to the pound to pick up a dog, and I hope you do, and you see that beautiful Irish setter and wonder why he's still there, step back and really consider what you're about ready to experience.
you know, everybody before they choose a dog, cats are a little bit more flexible, right? Because they do what they do, and they're going to adapt. But dogs, because of the breed specificities, you really should sit down and say, okay, what is my situation and what breed fits it best? You know, at one point in behavioral health, you know, the data is really good. If you've got a mental health concern, having a dog can be like really good for you, because you start forgetting about your depression and feeding the dog. You start forgetting about your depression and walking the dog. And so just having this relationship with this animal can be really good in terms of recovery. But you need to sit down and say, okay, I'm living in a 2-room apartment. I don't want a cattle dog.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want a border collie who's going to be like managing to run sideways on the walls because they need that much energy and exercise every day. You know, so once you figure out like what fits me, then you can get a dog that's really low stress, really positive, and ultimately it's a mutual benefit. So it's good for you, good for the dog, good for everybody.
Well, it's like during the pandemic, people were rushing to adopt pets, to bring a pet into the home. Well, see, that was a need. I believe it was a need that those people were asking for a distraction and asking for unconditional love. And see, that won't necessarily come to you if you're not capable of dealing with a pet.
No, no, any relationship requires work. You know, whether you're a parent, whether you're a husband or a wife, whether you're a pet owner, you know, kitty litter don't change itself.
Well, you know, the Yuma Humane Society actually has a foster program where you can like test drive a pet, and I assume they have one here too.
I have fostered dogs for the local humane society before, and yeah, you know what? For me, it was interesting because every animal I've ever spent any time with, I just like, okay, you and me forever, kid. Let's
Yeah,
just do
yeah.
this. And so for me, the lesson of fostering was to love the animal, but not be so clinging and possessive that you kept them from a better situation.
Well, absolutely, absolutely. So I don't know that I could do it. I think I would just become, this. Nobody could take care of this dog better than me. So how could I? How could I let somebody try? That was like giving
Yeah.
up puppies was always a difficult thing, but it had to be done.
Well, and again, it all relates back to attention and awareness, and ultimately using your attention instead of worrying about paying bills to worry about keeping your dog happy. You know, that's probably a valid choice, right? It's
No,
like,
absolutely. If you don't feel
and
loved,
at the dog park, I know dog park parents who are like psychic. They're like my dog just got a splinter on their left paw, and I'm like, how do you know? And they're like, because they're so attuned,
yeah.
their attention is so naturally concordant with the animal that they just pick up stuff like that. And I'm like looking around going, are my dogs still in the park?
Well, it's just a different style, Scott.
You know, I've got one of my project dog is half Aussie Shepherd, so she doesn't feel very compelled to be within 10 feet of me. She
Right.
she she realizes that wherever I am in the park, she can get there in about 10 seconds, and so that's good enough for her. So
Right, but she always knows exactly where you are.
I would assume they're very detail oriented dogs.
And they're considered one of the brighter breeds, particularly if she's not inbred too much.
Yeah, well, I'm not the brightest breed of human, so that's actually a bad combination.
Yeah, but you went on
I
well.
sit, I sit down, I sit down with a plate of carne asada, and I'm lucky if I get like 2 bites.
Aw, but because you share.
Absolutely.
All right, Scott, why don't you give us a couple takeaway skills that we might consider using to find a happy medium between focus and attention?
All right. First one, be aware of awareness. Be aware that beyond whatever you're attending to, whatever you're task oriented to, whatever you're focusing on, there's a whole world around you. There's a world of people, there's a world of animals, there's a world of temperature, there's a world of light, there's a world of sound, there's a world of everything, and it's always there, whether you're noticing it or not. And so be aware of your awareness, and you may find yourself surrounded by things that, if you notice them, are very, very fulfilling and rewarding. So you may find a lot of peace and pleasure just in the sound of the birds in the morning. But you've got to stop, and you've got to stop and turn off your, oh, I've got to get to work on time, and hear the birds. And so I would say that that's the first thing, is be aware of awareness. And then I would say the second thing is be be assertive in managing your attention. Is it really worth the effort? Is it really something that you've bought into, or is it something that the world just expects you to do, and they laid that on you when you were 6, and you never really stopped and said, yeah, but this isn't really a good use of my life. So be aware of where your attention is. And it's almost like your electric bill. If you've got like 1,000 little electric vampires that are always running, but never really being used, but they're running up your electric bill, it's every once in a while you stop and say, you know what, I don't really need these plugged in all the time. And it's the same thing with your attention. Do I really need it plugged in? Do I really need this to be 6 hours of my day trying to sort this thing out? And I think once you begin to take ownership, once you begin to say, I am the steward of my attention. My attention's not my boss, although sometimes it feels that way.
Yeah.
I'm going to be the manager of my attention, and I'm going to look at it, and I'm going to begin to be a little bit more discerning on where the energy goes. I think if you do those two things, be aware of awareness, and then hold attention to task, just a little bit, that those two things together are going to end up opening some possibilities. And those possibilities are probably going to be more towards who you are as a person.
Well, Scott, I think that's good advice. Before we get out of here, I would like you to give everybody out there some insight into you. Now, what cartoon character did you love as a child, and as an adult, you still hold that cartoon? You still see credibility in that cartoon character?
I wonder if we're going to pick the same one. So, I always vibed to Bugs Bunny. And then when I grew up and I was like an adult, I actually had one of the kids that I was working in a mental health program drew a picture of Bugs Bunny and gave it to me and said, "You are just like this guy."
You
because whatever's happening, you're just chewing on your carrot. I'm like, what's up, Doc?
Yeah, what's up? I care.
And so I think ultimately that was probably my number one. My number two was probably a more obscure one. Cool McCool. Danger was his business. You remember Cool McCool?
Yeah, I do, sadly.
Cool McCool. Danger is my business. And I liked him, because he was accidentally correct. I think accidentally correct is a really cool place to be. And I've always admired people who were able to like get the right spot for all the wrong reasons. And to me, that is a really cool talent that I always wanted to have more of. But Bugs Bunny, nonplussed, not solution focused, making fun at the world, laughing at the weirdness of the world. That was probably my guy.
And you still hold him dear.
Oh yeah, I don't watch Bugs Bunny reruns on TV very often because I saw them all like 18 times as a kid. Wait, but Justin, what about you?
Oh, well, the primary one, and I don't think people will have trouble believing this, would have been Foghorn Leghorn. Get away from
classic.
me. Get away from me, kid. You bother me. And just about anything Mel Blanc did. Yosemite Sam, none of the ducks, but and then of course if it's Muppets, it would have to be animal.
Nice. I've got him up at two. Grover.
Oh, there you go. Gosh, well, you got the nose for that.
This is near.
Yeah.
This is far.
Well, Scott, I think that since we've digressed to Muppets, maybe it's time to let everybody go. But I do appreciate this topic, and I am starting to get more appreciation for those dog parkians.
The co-production team at the dog park, it does the heavy lifting.
There you go.
All I do is throw word into the room, and I just kind of start taking notes and walk away.
All right, everybody. This has been Justin Case and Scott bringing you American consciousness. Thanks for joining us. Remember, additional information and links provided in this video is read more. We don't charge more for the choking on words. Today's the day to subscribe to this channel. Please learn more about Scott when time permits.